Rich.
Well, if you have shopped at a grocery store, as I'm sure many of us have, or filled up our cars, as I'm sure many of us have, or eaten at a restaurant, as I'm sure many of us have, or paid for any of our home heating bills, etc., I'm sure that we are all well aware that the cost of living in Canada is in fact going up. It is more expensive than ever. For many Canadians, the burden is overwhelming. That's what I'm hearing from the constituents of Lethbridge. They're feeling a pinch in a big way. And what's disheartening is that it actually didn't need to be this way. You see, we have a problem in this country, a really big problem. That problem used to have one name, but now it's enmeshed with a hyphen, NDP Liberal government. Its policies and its utilization of those policies. And they have an effect on every single Canadian every single day. From coast to coast, Canadians are speaking out about the concerns they have with regard to the expense of living. Today we are discussing the main estimates, which is a document that outlines a whole lot of spending. The new coalition government has brought this bill forward to seek authorization from Parliament to spend more than $190 billion. Wow. It's easy to speak in abstractions and generalizations, but we have to hone in and talk about the very people that are represented by this piece of legislation. When we do that, this is what we see. We see that the people have a voice that is largely being ignored by the current policies. Now, the NDP Liberals, they love to talk about how much they stand for all Canadians. Well, no, not the Canadians that disagree with them, who have a different opinion, a different mindset. Then you're not valuable. Now, they treat Canadians as victims in need of a big government. They don't look at Canadians as capable, hardworking, innovative, creative problem solvers who are able to achieve success. Instead, the government struggles with a savior complex. They need to be needed. They want to keep the people beholden to them, otherwise they feel powerless. So numerous policies and handing out massive amounts of free cash keep the Canadian people enchained to the government. It's a form of slavery. It's cruel. Yep. Today's government spending becomes tomorrow's taxes, but tomorrow has arrived. It's called inflation. It's here. The Prime Minister promised to grow the middle class, but in reality, his policies are making it more difficult for Canadians to get ahead, for Canadians to make ends meet. Many have come into my office with their heating bill in hand, some even with tears in their eyes because they are overwhelmed by the cost of heating their home. Charlie and Emma are two that come to mind, seniors with a fixed income. Single moms have come in and talked to me about the cost that is incurred in filling up their vehicle with gasoline in order to go to work or to take their kids to soccer practice or dance. Joe recently came in and he had a conversation with me around paying school tuition. He wanted to know if there was anything that I could do to help because he actually doesn't have the money to be able to afford his tuition and eat this month. So he has to make a choice. Families are having to weigh whether or not they can afford nutritious food for their families, or whether or not they can drive 200 kilometers to see an ailing loved one. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the reality. This is not figurative. This is not theory. This is the reality. Child poverty is increasing. Hundreds of kids in my riding go to sleep every night with empty stomachs. They wake up in the morning and they go to school hungry. My region is one of the most severe in the country. These aren't made-up stories. This is real life. These are people being impacted by government policy. And to add insult to injury, the government will now move ahead with its punitive tax hike. Carbon tax will rise by 25% on April 1st. It's no joke. It's confounding to think that when we face some of the highest cost of living, the government wants to impose yet another tax, an increased tax. The Prime Minister has claimed that it's all done for the sake of modifying people's behavior, as if Canadians have a choice as to whether or not they're going to heat their homes, or rural Canadians can choose whether or not they're going to drive to work. Wake up. And let's talk about farmers for a moment. God bless them. Seriously, God bless them.
Hear, hear.
Because we are entering into a time in history when we need them now more than ever. And instead of celebrating them and their incredible contributions to this country, this government is choosing to punish them. We're talking about men and women who actually contribute to environmental care through carbon sequestration, through science, through innovation. And yet this government is going to be punitive, going to punish these individuals for feeding the world, for taking care of the environment, for stewarding the soil, the land, the air, the water. Ludicrous. If the carbon tax really is about changing behavior, if it really is about making the environment a better place, then farmers should be rewarded, not punished.
That the honourable members are anxious to take part into the debate and to ask questions and comments, but I would just ask members on both sides of the House who have been participating while this member has had the floor to please hold on to their thoughts and their comments so that they can ask those at the appropriate time. The honourable member for Lethbridge.
When my Conservative colleagues and I raise concerns about how expensive life is getting, the government responds by saying, yeah, but we've spent this much money. We've cut this many checks. You get some money, you get some money, you get some money, you get some money, you all get some money. As if spending money was the measure of success. Since when? Show me the metrics. Show me how government checks are making life better than a paycheck. You can't, because there's no evidence. It's to the contrary. When the Prime Minister took office, a typical home cost $435,000 in this country. You want to know what it costs now? $810,000. Wow. That's 85% inflation in just 6 years. 30-year-olds are stuck living in their parents' basement without a lot of hope for their future. Home ownership, that's out the window. Seniors can't afford groceries. Workers can't afford to put fuel in their car. Natural gas for home heating is up by 19%. And I know it might be uncomfortable for the NDP Liberal government to face this, but these really are the numbers. We don't live in an idealistic world. We're beyond the realm of theory, folks. Since the start of the pandemic, the government has brought in $176 billion in new spending. That is unrelated to COVID. So they try to claim that all their spending is somehow making our lives better because COVID made them bad. $176 billion was spent just for political reasons, folks. So what is the solution? How do we move forward? Well, it's less government and more Canada. One of the primal responsibilities of government is actually to facilitate an environment of economic prosperity. Now, this doesn't mean running our country into the ground through debt and taxation. No, it means putting policies in place that empower the people. Canadians. They want to be able to provide them for themselves by earning a paycheck. But instead of allowing them to have autonomy over their finances and their livelihoods, this government is butting in, taking money, putting it through bureaucracy, scraping a little off the top, pushing it out the other side. It doesn't make sense. Instead of promoting prosperity apart from government, the Prime Minister seems keen on ensuring that the only way Canadians can support themselves is with a government check. It's wrong. The NDP Liberals often accuse this side of the House, the true opposition that is, as being too political when we question this type of stuff. But we aren't the only ones doing so. The Parliamentary Budget Officer recently reported, and I quote, "It appears to me that the rationale for the additional spending initially set aside as stimulus no longer exists." It no longer exists, folks, which means stop. Stop the spending. Stop printing money. Stop pushing this country further and further into debt. Stop punishing Canadians.
Stop.
It's not a leader, it's not a political party or the government that is going to restore economic prosperity and future success for this country. It is the Canadian people. This country needs individual Canadians to rise up and strive to reach their greatest potential. And for this to happen on mass scale, we need the government to get out of the way. The Canadian people are the problem solvers and the solution makers and the wealth generators that this country needs. And when each of us chooses to pick up our load and carry our responsibility forward, the entire nation advances. Let's empower the people.
Question.